Good morning, everyone. Convening the Committee on Labor and Government Operations. It is Thursday, February 1st, 2024 at 9 a.m. in conference room 309. We have a number of items on the agenda today. Where's my folder? The yellow folder. Okay. If you could keep your testimony to 2 minutes, we've got a lot of testifiers today, mostly because of the paid family leave bill. So we're going to start asking you to conclude your testimony after 2 minutes. If you're on Zoom and you lose connection, we'll try to get you back. If we're still on the same bill, then we'll try to get you to testify if you can reconnect. But the House is not responsible for, obviously, the connection on the testifier's end. If the bill is passed, we will likely not be able to go back to your testimony, but just know that your submitted written testimony will be considered by the committee. All right, let's do it. First up, HB 1642 relating to general employment orientation. First up on Zoom, we have the Attorney General's office with comments. Nope, in person.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, members of the committee. My name is Amanda Donlin. I'm a Deputy Attorney General. The department takes no position as to this bill. Instead, we have offered written comments just about the language of the bill and some concerns we had. The first is the concern about the use of subsection in the bill, which kind of references itself and does not invoke the rest of the bill. So it does not create a violation of the rest of the section. And the second is that the bill creates a right to file a complaint pursuant to Chapter 89 in front of the Hawaii Labor Relations Board. However, there's nothing in Chapter 89 that does allow for complaints to be filed for this particular purpose, which is why we suggested adding a subsection in 89-13 sub A, which already enumerates ways in which complaints may be filed for violations by the employer. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Vice Chair? You good? Okay. All right, next up we have UPW in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, Kamakana Kamalo, Government Affairs Manager for UPW. We stand on our written testimony and support. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up we have HGEA in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. Nui Sabas with HGEA, standing on a written testimony and strong support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify in this measure? Members, any questions? No, I've got one quick one for the AG. I know in your testimony you said that we could add this to HRS 89-13 subsection A. If we were to add this as a line there, do you think that would be sufficient to alleviate your concerns and leave it in the Chapter 78 or whatever this bill is?
I'm sorry. So are you proposing to leave the subsection C in 78,
yes.
or just?
So if we left the subsection C in 78, but we added this to a note in 89-13 subsection A, would that alleviate the concern, or would we need to also eliminate it in subsection C?
If you're going to leave it in subsection C, we would suggest that instead of using the word subsection, to use the word section.
Section. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let's move on. Next up, we have HB 1644 relating to the employees' retirement system. First up, we have the Director of Budget and Finance, or Department of Budget and Finance, in opposition.
Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, Sabrina Nasser, Deputy Director for Department of Budget and Finance. We oppose this measure because it increases the pension's unfunded liability and because overtime costs are would be difficult to calculate, so we can't determine the true cost of this measure. We defer to ERS to explain this in more detail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And speaking of ERS, in opposition.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. I'm Tom Williams, the Executive Director of the ERS, and you have our written testimony in opposition to this measure. And I'd like briefly to summarize a couple of key points. We oppose this measure because it violates the legislature's prohibition against benefit enhancements until our plan is fully funded. In 2012, when key reforms were introduced to our program, a change in the definition of compensation was one of the major changes. It excluded overtime, lump sums, bonuses, allowances, differentials, except for teacher shortage differentials from the definition of compensation. Those compensation elements remain in place for Tier 1 employees. This change is largely responsible for halting the runaway growth in our unfunded actuarial accrued liability, which was forecast to grow exponentially. That unfunded liability has now peaked and is forecast to steadily decline. We know if overtime is permitted for Tier 2 members that it will adversely affect our unfunded liability, our period to full funding, budgets for fringe benefits, as well as the state's bond rating. Allowance of overtime is so very challenging because we can't know in advance the level of overtime, its duration, or for how many people. This uncertainty represents risk. If we can't forecast compensation, we can't forecast retirement benefits, liabilities, or costs. And for these reasons, we oppose this measure. I'm available to answer your questions.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have UPW in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, again, Kamakana Kamala, UPW. UPW stands on its written testimony and support. I think the only point we'd like to make is when these bills are introduced, we know what ERS's position is always going to be. And we understand that they have a mission that they have to adhere to. I think the conversation is, for us, at least our perspective, is that retirement benefits are static. And as we seek to fill hundreds of vacancies in the state, I think we all need to look at a way to, whether it be in cooperation with ERS or otherwise, to improve benefits. We're also looking at, degradation of benefits for prospective employees as well. And we just think it's the wrong direction to be moving in. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, HGA in support.
For the record, Nui Sabas with HGEA. We stand on a written testimony and strong support. I just want to note that in these occurrences when overtime would be calculated, this is when an employee has been directed to serve the public during a time of emergency under the emergency proclamation. During these specific times, it should not happen as often, or so just to be clear, it's something that would just be more sporadic of nature. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Vice Chair, any questions? All right, I've got one for ERS. So you mentioned in your testimony, I believe it was your testimony, that there's a concern about spiking, but because this is only applying to emergency proclamations and directed overtime in times of emergency, I don't see that as allowing spiking, honestly. I mean, it's not an optional thing, as overtime sometimes might be construed as.
Chair, I'll have to take another look at the bill, but I thought some subsequent language actually suggested that it would apply after July of 2024 to all employees and all overtime. So
But only if they're directed under an emergency proclamation to do overtime. Does that alleviate some of your concern?
Well, it alleviates it in part, but not entirely, because there are numerous emergency proclamations. We've had them, and the duration of those, and in fact, most state employees are considered essential employees and could be covered by one of those emergency proclamations. We were, for example, during COVID, many state agencies. So it wouldn't fully address our concerns. But we read the bill to go beyond just the emergency, but that may be the more accurate reading. But our sense was that it went beyond, beginning in July, to all employees and all overtime.
Okay. Knowing the intent of this bill now, though, I would like ERS to submit more narrow language, if you'd like, to propose it for the next committee to hear.
Okay, we'll consider that, sir.
Okay, thank you. HGA and UPW, please. So I had the same concern, to be totally honest. Emergency proclamations seem to be frequent now and of very long duration. Although I'd like that this bill is narrowly tailored to only address emergency procs, I mean, there's an emergency proc for housing, there's an emergency proc for, I mean, you know, you name it. When that gets out of control, that does lend to a not very narrow use of this. Can you address that, please?
Yeah, so, you know, we'd be open to obviously stringent language to really narrow down what jobs and duties of employees do to support an emergency proclamation. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, our members within the Department of Labor were processing unemployment claims. I'm sure they were working overtime, and for that, to support a public emergency during a pandemic, that overtime should have been, in our position, this overtime should have been counted. So yes, we are definitely open to providing more stringent language to identify which overtime would be counted and which wouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Rep. Cavalli, do you have any questions on this bill? If not, don't. Okay. Okay. Let's move on. HB 1645 relating to state position vacancies. All right, not the fun one yet. Heard with comments.
Good morning, Chair. Erin Connor on behalf of DHERD for Brenna Hashimoto today on Zoom. Just wanted to stand on our testimony providing comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, UPW in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, Rep. Capella, Kamakana, Kaimaloa, UPW. We stand on a written testimony in support. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have HGA in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Nui Sabas with HGEA, standing on a written testimony in strong support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify in this measure? Members, any questions? Yeah, I have one question for DHERD. You mentioned that this is mostly encompassed in a report already required by your office. Are you able to identify the additional data that this new report that this bill is proposing to instead add it to the existing report under HRS 26.5, lots of subsections, HUA?
Yeah, we can provide that to the committee, the additional things that the report is requesting, that the bill is proposing. I can't identify it all off the top of my head right now, but we can submit that to the committee, the additional items that your bill is proposing.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to do that, and I'm going to ask HGA to also do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? If not, let's move on to HB 1832 relating to hiring. First up, we've got Office of Planning and Sustainable Development with comments.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and member. The Office of Planning and Sustainable Development notes that there have been a number of external changes on trends, increased retirements, very tight labor market, and I think all of those have combined to make it difficult for DHERD to screen applicants for the minimum qualifications quickly enough to get lists to our agencies that need to fill our vacancies. We know that the legislature is concerned about getting us to fill our vacancies faster. We think that allowing this very routine task to be delegated by DHERD to the agencies would speed up filling of vacancies dramatically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have DHERD in opposition.
Good morning, Chair Matsuyoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. I am Heather Ching Manzano representing DHERD. Brenna Hashimoto apologizes for not being here today, but DHERD stands upon their written testimony in opposition of this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have DBED with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Dane Wicker, Deputy Director, DBED. We stand on our testimony and comments. This is an innovative way to explore, as we have a 20% vacancy across all our attached agencies and programs. So, thank you.
That's actually a low vacancy rate for government departments. So congratulations. Next up, we have Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation with comments.
Hi, good morning. Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. My name is Melanie Martin. I am the Deputy Director for Administration. We stand on our written testimony, offering comments, and here for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have UPW in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members, again, Kamakana Kaimaloa, UPW, we stand on a written testimony in support. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Oh, I'm surprised DOH isn't here. All right, members, any questions? Yep, Rep. Capella.
I think D heard. Okay. Thank you for your testimony. In here, one of the things that you talk about is that DHERD allows departments to already kind of make this request, although it doesn't seem like for every department or agency or unit that does this or has this or needs workers, it seems like they may not have that opportunity. So can you explain that a little bit more? Because I have a lot of vacancies in my district that where people say that the problem is you folks.
Thank you for the question. So DHERD allows all departments the opportunity to request delegation for unique classes within their departments to take on the full function of recruitment, which starts from the request for with the vacancy. They are the ones who post it. They accept all the applications. They screen all the applications, and the list is right there for their department. So the departments have the ability to request that at any given time. There are a number of departments who currently do that today.
Okay, it just seems like that seems nice, but it seems like that's not the practice that's actually working. So I don't know where the issue might be, but I think this bill is really trying to address that. But thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Yeah, Vice Chair.
Sorry, Ms. Ching. Just as a follow-up, how often do departments request that type of delegation?
We actually just got one yesterday from the Department of Land and Natural Resources. The Department of Health, to my understanding or knowledge, requested it last year. So it is an active practice that we do implement.
Okay, and then are there times where you deny their request?
If the class is not of a unique nature to that department. So other departments have that same class of work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I've got some questions too. Any other questions from the committee? Okay. Now, my understanding with your director's testimony was that the departments actually already do determine and review applications for minimum qualification for internal transfers. Is that correct?
They're internal employees to that department, yes.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that departments already have employees within their departments that are trained and able to review minimum qualifications for applicants for positions in their department.
Within their department, within their control, that is correct.
What's the difference between internal and external for reviewing minimum qualifications? Do they need any extra training to do that?
They would require some additional training, one with our NeoGov system that they do not currently utilize to run their internal recruitment process. There is a level of scope that is different in the review of external versus internal applicants. Within the department representatives have the ability to look at employment history of their current employees to make determinations of whether they will meet the minimum qualifications that employee is applying for.
I'm sorry, are you saying that you're treating internal applicants differently than external applicants?
No, not at all. The internal recruitment staff within that department have access to a little bit more information on their employees that they wouldn't have access to.
So they need a lesser degree of training to review those applications? Is that what you're telling me?
I'm not saying anything. The training, as far as reviewing MQs, is the same.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is there's some information that an internal applicant and internal staff have access to within their department.
Which is why they require less training to review those. Because what you're telling me right now is that they need additional training in order to review external applicants, right?
There is a different level of scope, yes.
Okay, so does that mean that we're treating these applicants differently?
No, not at all. They are still reviewed against the same minimum qualifications.
Now, don't get me wrong. I want to agree with you here because, in my opinion, they already have the expertise to do this. And not only that, but according to your HAR and your internal memos that I read, you're right that they do have the ability to request it. What's confusing to me is that DHERD is seems to be not allowing, I mean, in talking to all these other department heads that are calling me on my cell phone to complain about DHERD, is that it does not seem like DHERD is letting go and actually allowing them to review these applications. So it's interesting that Department of Health made that request last year and they're still pending, and another department is requesting it as well. But in talking to a lot of other departments, this does not seem to be a true option, even though it's allowed under your internal rules.
It is a true option for those with unique classes of work to their department, yes. And that is what the Department of Health did request, and they were granted that last year. The DLNR did come in just yesterday, and we are reviewing that request right now as we speak.
How much more training does their internal HR people have to undergo to review these external applications?
Approximately 3 days, 3.5 days of training.
Is this for NeoGov or to equip them to actually review the applications themselves?
It's through the NeoGov process.
3 days?
Well, half days, yes.
Wow. Okay, and is that that's an online training process?
No, we do that with our staff.
So they have to come in?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Rep. Cabela.
Thank you, Ms. Chang. How often do you folks deny a department's request?
Not very often, to my recollection.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I have a quick question for the AGs, and we talked about this a little bit, so I won't get into it, but there's a Supreme Court case, Kuomo'o, that has been quoted to me, which I think the legal interpretation is off, so I'd appreciate the AGs looking into this further. That Supreme Court case basically states that there can't be any secret minimum qualifications that aren't disclosed in the job posting, which I agree with as a good policy. There is a provision in this bill that would allow departments to determine their own minimum qualifications with justification to DHERD to substitute those minimum qualifications. So it's expansive in my mind rather than restrictive, as in the Kuomo'o case. But if the AGs could look into that and get back to me whether the expansive nature of allowing alternate minimum qualifications is allowed under that Supreme Court case, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh yeah, please, Rep. Garrett.
Sorry, Deputy Director Wicker, please. Reviewing your testimony, you do note that you appreciate the intent of offering comments, but continuing to read your testimony, it sounds pretty evident that you're in support of the bill.
We would support the discussion and looking at different ways to help with reducing our vacancies and filling positions.
Okay. The mic a little.
Sorry, we would support the discussion and exploring ways to help us fill our vacancies, yes.
Has your department been in touch with DHERD about having classes of work delegated to
I know
folks?
some of our programs, yes.
And what is the result of that? Were you denied at any point?
I do have OPSD here. We have been denied and previously, yes.
And do you remember the grounds for that?
The grounds. May I bring up our
Of course,
administrator?
please.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Garrett. When I was Deputy Director at DBED, we asked for delegation for the Economic Development Specialist class, which we have a number of positions. It was denied on the basis that there were 2 positions over at Department of Ag that had that same class title. Our argument was that we know best what our economic development specialists need to do. They're very different from what the Department of Ag economic development specialists do. However, because that class was a broad class that crosses 2 departments, it was denied. The merit system was deliberately set up to create broad classifications rather than narrow ones, to provide for promotional opportunities. So in setting up the classification system is with broad classes, you create a system where delegation is almost impossible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Director, if this bill continues to make its way through, do you think you'll need additional staff within your HR division to process or to handle this additional responsibility? Are you comfortable with what you have?
No, we would need 1 additional. In fact, we are looking at our capacity now. DBED over the last couple of years have acquired new agencies, and that's already increased the load of our current HR staff in our ASO office. So we'll be looking at least at 1 position.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Deher, could you come back up, please? Sorry, first of all, do you have a response to Ms. Evans' contention about, I guess, your denial? I know this probably predates you, but regarding the unique class of work.
Yes, so the reason for the broadness of the classes is so that multiple departments can utilize the different classes of work that are there. But as she stated, she knows best what they need for their department, but the minimum qualifications for that class of work would cover just the minimum knowledge that any department's position would require. So it wouldn't just be tailored to one department. We use that minimum across the board. So as she's saying, their positions are different than the Department of Agriculture's positions. So how they would be looking at their candidates could potentially lead to inconsistencies in the screening.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry. So they know their position best, clearly, and you're saying that they shouldn't be able to determine the minimum qualifications, but some person in DHERD who has no experience in the field should be able to review, is going to be better able to review the applications than DBET or the Department of Ag?
We're saying we are screening the applications based on the predetermined minimum qualifications that are set, that apply to all positions across the board, not just to a single agency.
But surely they know what the minimum qualifications would be, and if a candidate would meet it for their position. I don't understand why DHERD is unwilling to allow them to determine that.
So within the recruitment process, to determine the best candidate after they've passed that minimum qualification review, that's where we state that the interview process helps to determine whether or not a candidate is the best fit for their position.
So if they're doing an internal search for the same position, you allow them to determine whether the minimum qualifications are met. But if they do an external one, all of a sudden they are unable to determine the exact same analysis for minimum qualifications? That doesn't seem to make sense.
So they're using the same minimum qualifications that we are using. That is a correct statement. They are only looking within their own departmental employees when they are doing that. When we go to external recruitment, we are now not just looking for one department specifically.
I mean, you trust them or you don't, right? And you've been trusting these departments for years to do internal minimum qualifications reviews. When you go external, it's the exact same minimum qualifications, the exact same analysis and applicants. I mean, either you trust them or you don't. Do you trust them or not?
If I'm speaking from a personal perspective, I don't know every individual to say I trust everybody, but from a department standpoint, the consistency across that we are responsible for, that is what we are trying to ensure is maintained throughout the system. So when one department is screening,
but you actively trust them to do the internal minimum qualification review for the exact same minimum qualifications as would be analyzed for external applications. Is that correct?
Yes, and we would just ask that they be trained before they take on delegation of classes of work.
Is that why you guys denied them previously, though? That doesn't sound like it. It doesn't sound like a lack of training.
I can't speak to the before. I apologize for that. I wasn't here at that point in time.
Fair enough.
Based on the rationale that was given, that is the rationale I can support for right now. I can go back and talk to our director to further review that and see. But
we've talked. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, let's move on. HB 1889, relating to workers' compensation medical benefits. First up, we have DLIR in support.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members. Joanne Fidenhar for the Department of Labor, standing in support of this measure and are available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Hawaii State Fire Council in support. Are they on Zoom? Are you doing Hawaii State Fire Council? No. No. Yeah. Is Hawaii State Fire Council here? He's not responding. Okay. Hawaii State Fire Council, we understand you're on Zoom. If you can get your Zoom working, we'll come back to you. Or someone just unmuted themselves.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, members of the committee. This is Gary Lum on behalf of State Fire Council. I do apologize for the late written testimony that was submitted. We do stand in strong support of this measure. However, we have a suggestion on the language of the amendment. I call your attention to page 3, line 14. The amendment states female reproductive organs. The State Bar Council suggests the word female be stricken from that amendment language to include both genders. Thank you.
Thank you. I do note that testes is already in there. Anyway, thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have Hawaii Firefighters Association in support.
Good morning. My name is Celeste Snip, and I'm representing the Hawaii Firefighters Association on behalf of our members. And we have.
Oh yeah, sorry. For everyone, if you could speak about a shaka or a fist away from the microphone, that really helps.
Okay.
For the people on Zoom too, and for YouTube.
Absolutely. Good morning. My name is Celeste Snip. I'm representing the Hawaii Firefighters Association. We stand in strong support of this measure. You have an attachment that also includes some information from the International with regards to women's health and cancers in that constituency. So if you have any questions, you need any assistance in more information, we'd be happy to help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have one of my sister's childhood friends, Sarah Turgeon, in support.
Good morning, Chairman Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and committee members. Hello, my name is Sarah Turgeon, and I've had the honor of serving my community as a member of the Honolulu Fire Department for over 10 years now. I'm here today testifying in strong support of HB 1889, which expands firefighters' workers' compensation medical benefits to include coverage of breast cancer and cancer of the female reproductive organs. It is well documented that firefighters see cancer rates higher than the general population. The International Association of Firefighters, in coordination with various other organizations and research bodies, have found that certain types of cancers are seen at a significantly higher rate in firefighters when compared to the general population. Of note are over a dozen types of cancers to include breast cancer, cervical cancer, uterine cancer, and ovarian cancer. Expanding workers' compensation coverage to include breast cancer and cancer of the female reproductive organs and just reproductive organs in general, as State Fire Council Gary Lum member said, would expand care and benefits to approximately 40 female firefighters in the state of Hawaii. And the passage of Bill 1889 would also offer greater gender equity in acknowledging that women in the fire service face the same risk as their male counterparts and would provide them with care in the unfortunate event that they develop any of these types of cancers specific to their gender. Thank you all for your time this morning and the opportunity to testify in support of HB 1889.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? I will note that we got a lot of testimony and support from a lot of individuals. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to HB 1944 relating to workers' compensation. First up, we have DLIR in support.
Morning again, Joanne Fittenhar. We stand in our written testimony in support and are available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Hawaii Insurers Council in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Malia Leong testifying today on behalf of Hawaii Insurers Council. Hawaii Insurers Council supports this bill. The bill provides for an MRI without a treatment plan during the first 60 days after an injury under certain circumstances and one consultation with an orthopedic or a neurologic specialist for the evaluation and treatment of the employee's injury. We believe that early diagnosis of these cases where there are commonly seen injuries to the neck and back will lead to faster treatment for the injured worker and their return to work. We urge passage of this bill. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Next up, we have Premier Medical Group in support. And again, just adjust the mic so it's near to your mouth. Thanks, Fair.
Thank you. My name is Fairlene Mahoney. I submitted late testimony, but we also stand by it. I believe Dr. Miskovich, I'm not sure if he was able to get his in either, but he's in support of the measure also.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Okay. Members, any questions? All right, thank you. Let's move on to HB 1945, relating to a leave cash out program. First up, we have Hurd with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Eric Nita, on behalf of Brenna Hashimoto. She apologized for not being here, and we stand by written testimony comments.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation in support.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. Melanie Martin, Deputy Director for Administration. Yes, we support the intent of this bill, and we are all for exploring innovative ways to get our adult corrections officers to come to work. In light of the Office of Collective Bargaining's testimony, though, its written testimony, we would defer to that office for the state's position. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have UPW in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, again, Kamakana Kamala, United Public Workers. You have a written testimony and strong support. This is actually a pilot program we've proposed to a few of the employers, including DCR. We're happy to hear that they're supportive of the intent. We just want to ensure that, so the bill actually states accrued leave. We just want to make sure that compensatory time, comp time, is actually eligible for cash out, because that's the most difficult for our adult corrections officers to actually utilize. They're allowed to actually, for tax purposes, once you receive a certain number of overtime hours, they're offered the opportunity to actually accept comp time instead. And so that can actually rack up quite quickly. So we would hope that you would, we just want to make sure that that's possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have HGEA in support.
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Nui Sabas with HGEA, standing on a written testimony and strong support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Please.
Morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, members of the committee. My name is Wilbert Holk. I'm the Chief Negotiator, Office of Collective Bargaining, and we stand on our testimony in opposition. Thank you. I'll be available for questions.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if we have your testimony. Did you? When did you submit it? Did you submit it on time? Okay. Do you have a copy of it? You have it. Okay. Oh, it's in here. Okay. Oh, actually, I think we do have it. Thank you. All right, members, any questions? Or sorry, anyone else here to testify? Okay, members, any questions? Okay, hearing none, let's move on to HB 1946 relating to process improvement. We have one testifier today, Office of Lieutenant Governor, with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Michelle Kurihara-Klein on behalf of Lieutenant Governor Sylvia Luke in the Office of the Lieutenant Governor. You have our written comments before you, and we'll stand on those comments and be available to answer questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Okay, I'm sorry, I had a couple questions for the previous measure. Members, with your indulgence, I'll move back to HB 1945. Is Hurd here? Still here for 1945, the cash out program? So in your testimony, you noted that making rules for a pilot program is impractical, but we do pilot programs all the time. What mechanism would you suggest to make rules for this particular pilot program?
You don't need to, we don't feel you need to promulgate rules to implement a pilot program. All you gotta do is, you don't need the rules, because the rules takes time. Is my understanding it's a complex process.
That's fair. But surely there must be rules for this program. So where would you suggest the guidelines be placed, or how they should be?
It would be, like you say, in the guidelines, or I don't know if they would enter into some kind of supplemental agreement or some kind of, or mutual agreement.
So you don't have any proposition of what mechanism we should use?
Again, because like the chief negotiator saying, and we're saying that it's negotiable, it probably would enter into a mutual agreement where you would have those guidelines included in that agreement.
Okay. Any other department here for this bill want to weigh in on how this should be promulgated, the rules should be promulgated? Great. All right. Is BNF still here? They left? Okay. That one wasn't that important. All right. Let's move on then to HB 1947. Yeah, go ahead. On 1946, the 3-year pilot program, process improvement. Okay.
Yes, Lieutenant Governor's office, please. Hey there.
Hello.
The bill does spell out the hiring of 3.0 FTEs.
Yes.
Do you think that's sufficient to effectuate the purpose of this bill?
Probably for the immediate requests from the legislature as contained in the bill, that should be sufficient. And it would be hard to determine at this moment what future requests might be coming in. So it would be, at this moment, I think 3 would be sufficient. However, looking forward, it may not be. And at that point, then there would certainly be a request for consideration.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, any other questions on 1945 or 1946? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to 1947, relating to the employees' retirement system. First up, we have ERS in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, as member of the committee, I'm Tom Williams of ERS, and we stand on our written testimony in support, and I'm available to answer questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have DLIR in support.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Bill Kunstman, Deputy Director of the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. We support the intent of this measure and defer to the employees' retirement system and the budget and finance on the language, the details in the language. But we felt it was important to support because we think it'd be very helpful in our recruitment of boiler and elevator inspectors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Last, we have UPW in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, again, Kamakana Carmelo, UPW. We stand on our written testimony in support, and it warms us that we're standing on the same side as ERS this time. Thank you.
This date in history. All right, anyone else here to testify on this measure? Members, any questions? I do have one for ERS. I sent you some actuarial information that the House crunched that was significantly higher cost for this program. Did you? I never received a response from ERS though.
I don't recall having received that information, Chair, but certainly I'll take a look for it.
Okay.
But the expected cost was higher than what we've suggested in our testimony?
About 40 or 50 times higher.
Well,
so significant.
I would only suggest that the information we developed was developed by our actuary, and we rely on it, but we're more than happy to review and respond to this alternative information.
Okay. My office will try to find that email and resend it to you. It was an attachment with, I think, all of their assumptions. I don't know who's right. I'm not an actuarial by any means, so I just wanted some comment.
We'll be pleased to respond. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, members? Okay, seeing none, let's move on to HB 2070 relating to procurement. First up, we have General Contractors Association of Hawaii in support.
Good
Morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Ryan Skuda on behalf of GCA. We stand on our written testimony and support. Happy to answer any questions.
Yep, thank you. Next, we have Jas W. Glover Limited in support. Not present? Are they present in person? Okay. Not present. Moving on. Hawaiian Dredging Construction Company Incorporated in support. Not present either. Anyone here from Hawaiian Dredging? Okay, hearing, seeing none. John Bustard in support, an individual. Okay, not present. Oh, people like clicking that testimony button. That is all we have today, so I guess we just have GCA. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Members, any questions? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to HB 2196 relating to public employment. First up, we have DHERD with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Raynell Yee on behalf of Director Brenna Hashimoto for the Department of Human Resources Development. She apologizes for not being here today.
Sorry, could you move the mic?
Oh, I'm sorry. So she apologizes for not being here today, and we stand on our written testimony providing comments, and I'm available to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have DLNR with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Alice Schutte, DLNR Human Resources Officer, on behalf of Chairperson Don Chang. We stand on our written testimony with comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have the University of Hawaii with comments.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, members of the committee. My name is Alan Rosenfeld. I'm the Associate Vice President for Academic Programs and Policy at the University of Hawaii System. I'm standing in for Deborah Halbert, the Vice President, who is on conference travel on the continent. The University of Hawaii stands behind its written testimony, offering comments on this bill, and if I may just highlight a few key points briefly. Thank you so much. If the measure moves forward, we respectfully request that the committee consider adding a line to the proposed language found in Section 2 for HRS paragraph 78 to add, quote, or when the position in question requires specialized knowledge, skills, or subject matter expertise, end quote. So we provide a few examples in our testimony. Of course, the University of Hawaii itself, our faculty members do not require licensure, but surely they need at least a baccalaureate degree. In fact, they need a master's degree or higher because they're supposed to be subject matter experts in their academic disciplines. We provide a couple of other poignant examples: construction manager, auditor, et cetera, where you would expect that a bachelor's degree would be required. We also, as you might imagine, feel strongly that the university education provides future graduates with the ability to hone their communication skills, critical thinking ability, problem-solving skills that will help them serve their agencies, which are handling complex, situations and responsibilities more adeptly. So, thank you so much, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify in this measure? Members, any questions? Vice Chair.
Ms. Yee, please. Good morning.
Good morning.
You mentioned in your testimony that you did review all the classes of work within Bargain Unit 13, which is the professional and scientific class. Is there a possibility that other units may have a degree requirement outside of Unit 13?
Highly unlikely, but some of them have licensure requirements as prescribed by DCCA.
Okay. So, in terms of Unit 13 then, how many classes of work fall within that unit?
Okay, so approximately 800 classes of work in Unit 13.
Okay, thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, if not, let's move on to HB 2197 relating to Hawaii Retirement Savings Act. First up, we have DLIR in support.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Bill Kunzman, Deputy Director, DLIR, and we're going to stand out our testimony in strong support and be available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Retail Merchants of Hawaii with comments. Not present? Okay, not present. Next up, we have AARP in support.
Aloha, Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee. I'm Kaylee Lopez with AARP Hawaii, and we stand in strong support of HB 2197. The act was created to provide a low-cost way for retirement savings to be available to about 174,000 private sector workers who do not currently have access to retirement savings through their employer. This bill clarifies the definition of covered employer, but also corrects a really important best practice, which is changes the program from opt-in to opt-out. And so we stand in strong support of that. Clearly, there's at least 19 states that have passed this legislation. In 2022, the legislature found that to be very wise, and we appreciate that. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, last that we have listed is Mark A. Koppel, an individual in support. Not present? Okay, anyone else here to testify on this measure? Okay, members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to HB 2199 relating to workforce development. We have we have a number of testifiers today. First up, DLIR in support.
Chair Matayoshi, Vice Chair Garrett, and members of the committee, I'm Mayor Carpilitan Freitas with the Workforce Development Division. The department stands in support of this measure and offer comments, and I'm available for any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii with comments. Are they on Zoom? No? Okay, not present. Next up, we have IATSC 665 in support.
Aloha kako, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Tuyana Scanlon, President of IATSC Local 665. We stand on our written testimony in strong support and are available for questions. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to HB 2254 relating to employees. We have one testifier today, D. Hurd, with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. Raynell Yee again on behalf of Director Brenna Hashimoto. She apologizes again for not being here today. We stand on our written testimony, providing comments, and I'm available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? Okay, members, any questions? Okay, let's move on to the last item of the agenda, HB 2757 relating to paid family leave. We got a couple of testifiers on this one. Thank you to everyone who submitted testimony. We got about 130 in. Not everyone's here in person, obviously. We'll go with the departments first. First of all, we have Department of Labor and Industrial Relations, DLIR, in opposition.
Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee, Bill Kunzman, Deputy Director of the Department of Labor and Industrial Relations. We support the concept of paid family leave. However, the language in this bill that we oppose because it conflicts with some of our pre-existing laws and benefit programs, and will be available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, AAUW of Hawaii in support.
Can you hear me? Okay. Chair, Vice Chair, and members of committee, my name is Young Hovoli, and I'm the Public Policy Chair for AAUW of Hawaii. We are in strong support of this measure, paid family leave. And in addition to what I submitted in my written testimony, I did notice, I came up here because I did notice one of the testimonies quoted California. They were opposing the bill, saying that the paid family leave bill law in California did not make any difference. So I usually don't pay attention to California data, but I did quick research to figure out if I can make sense out of it. And I just have one data to share with you. California passed paid family leave about 20 years ago. So, and it took a couple of years to take effect. So I looked at what gender pay gap in California was in 2004. It was 80%. So for $1 working for $1 a man working full-time made, women made slightly over 80% in California in 2004. As of 2021, it's 88%. So is that because they had paid family leave? No, of course not. It's a lot more complex than that. But the fact that it did not have any effect on pay gap, I'll have to differ with that. So I just came up here to make that statement. And I'm here to answer any questions you may have on my written testimony. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next up, we have Hawaii Food Industry Association with comments.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Alexis Chapman for HFIA. We stand on our written testimony with comments, and I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Catholic Charities Hawaii in support. Online? No. Not responding. Betty Lou Larson, are you available on Zoom? We see you, but...
Sorry, I'm having trouble. Here I am. Okay. I'm Betty Lou Larson for Catholic Church Hawaii. And thank you very much for hearing the bill. Catholic Church supports this because we feel that many middle-class Alice families, as well as low-income families, really have severe burdens when they cannot work and they don't have paid or family or sick leave. We find that 42% of private sector workers do not have paid sick leave. So we feel this is an important program to both help our people who are struggling in so many ways to at least face some help if they have a family crisis and really have very little or no resources to get over that crisis if they cannot work. And so this will help them to, one, not go to work when they are sick, but they have to because they have to have the money. And two, it will help them to help others in their families who they may have to reduce pay, et cetera, in order to maintain the family ohana. So thank you very much for hearing this bill.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Stonewall Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in support.
Good morning. Michael Galoyu Jr. on behalf of the Stonewall Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. We stand in strong support of this legislation. It's desperately needed in this state. We are disappointed to hear the Department of Labor is yet again dragging their heels. If they really do support the intent, where is their bill? Where is their solutions? Just saying no is not a solution for our working families that desperately need paid family leave. And so we call upon you to pass a bill this session to get paid family leave enacted. The Department of Labor needs to step up to the table and come up with solutions and not just say no. And that goes for everybody else that's going to testify against this bill today, that you realize that you're testifying against our fellow workers, our fellow ohana here in Hawaii, and not making this a safe place for workers. So we encourage you to come up with solutions, not just say no, that we need to get this done. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. That was bordering on a little ad hominem attacks. If we could just take it down a little bit. Next up, we have Hawaii Hunger Action Network in support.
Aloha Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Daniela Spoto. I represent the Hawaii Hunger Action Network, which is a coalition of over 20 local organizations that stand in strong support of this measure. We stand on our written comments. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Hawaii Children's Action Network Speaks in support.
Aloha, Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. I'm Nicole Wu from Hawaii Children's Action Network, and thank you for hearing this important bill. I think it's a very well-written bill, very thoughtful, and I think there's a lot of myths about what paid family leave is. This bill does not just ask employers to just cover the leaves, but it's really trying to find a solution for families and their employers. Right now, when people have a serious health need for themselves, or, God forbid, they need to travel to California for treatment, or their spouse or their child is sick, they're going to go. They have to go. And right now, employers are stuck covering that pay. The family goes into crisis. Sometimes they end up having to take food stamps and TANF. So we're trying to build a program where everybody doesn't have to be in crisis all the time. And here in Hawaii, I really think family ohana is a value that we should uphold through policies like this. And we also have a silver tsunami coming towards us. We need to plan in advance for the workers who are going to have to take some time off to care for their parents in their final days of their lives, and make sure they have some pay when they're doing that. We're not asking for too much. There are some opposition that I just wanted to address. There are some pieces that were talking about how paid family leave didn't help in California or New Jersey. It didn't help low-income workers. I took a quick look at them. Those two states, originally, they're two of the oldest states for this program. As Young-hee said, California had it for 20 years. Those states originally just put in a straight 50-something% wage replacement, which is what our current TDI does. And research and studies have shown that that's why low-income workers can't take it. And that's why some of these papers show that there was a problem. We've learned from that since. California has changed the way that they're doing their payments. It's about to go into effect, or maybe just did, so that lower income workers get paid more and higher income workers get paid a little less. So we're learning from all the other states that have been doing it where it works, and we want to put in the best practices of other states. And there's also, concerns about costs to businesses. My employer uses ProService as the HR provider, and we found out that all ProService employers are currently paying 0.43% of their payroll in TDI, at least according to our paperwork. 0.43% just for TDI. That's for your own health needs. So, for example, when a family has a baby, TDI covers the mom if she physically gave birth and needs to physically recover. And they get about 5 or 6 weeks. A doctor signs off on a form. Non-birth parents don't get that. Dads generally don't get that, adoptive parents. And we're paying 0.43% for that already. Employers are. And we're talking about a program in the other states. It's costing average of 2/3 to 3/4%, but you get so much more. You get real paid family leave for both parents. You get time off to care for a family member who might be ill, and those other leaves that are just crucial to families. I mean, people are going to take time off. We have to figure out how to deal with it. And we do, in this bill, I noticed that it says that, it's a split half and half between employers and employees. That's what Social Security and Medicare do now. It seems like a fair starting point, at least, that we split the cost and make it so that we can all have that safety net. And finally, there was mention that we include small employers. Yes, but there's actually an exemption so that they are paying half as much as the big employers. So it's really well thought out to make sure that we're covering in a thoughtful way. And self-employed people can opt in if they wish. So I encourage you to take a look at some of the individual testimony where small business employers talk about how this could help them compete against the larger businesses, and the stories that people are telling about how much they've struggled when their family's been in crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have A Better Balance in Support.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Cassandra Gomez, and I'm a senior staff attorney at A Better Balance, a national nonprofit advocacy organization that uses the power of the law to advance justice for workers so they can care for themselves and their loved ones without jeopardizing their economic security. To that end, we have been leaders in the fight for workplace leave laws around the country for over a decade and have helped to draft nearly all of the paid leave laws throughout the country.
Sorry, could we could we interrupt you for just a second? We're getting a lot of feedback. Are we able to adjust that? It's on her side. Okay.
I apologize. Is it on my side, Chair?
Yeah, I think so. We've got a couple of people covering their ears, and I'm tempted to join them.
Is it better now?
Could you try to move maybe a little back from the microphone? Maybe that'll help. Or
Absolutely.
turn off your speakers, maybe, or if you're.
I don't have any speakers on. I apologize.
Okay, let's just try it.
Okay. Can you hear me? Okay. Now.
It's quite a bit of feedback. We can't do anything on our side. Okay. Well, okay, let's give it a try. Cover your ears, guys.
I apologize. I'll be brief. In my testimony, I have suggested a number of key suggestions that would greatly improve upon the already protections that would be provided under HB 2757. So I would encourage the committee and the chair to refer to my written testimony for the specific revisions that we suggest. But as others have testified today, I do want to add that many states have had paid family medical leave insurance programs in effect for years and have expanded upon those programs, recognizing that they're a critical part of the social safety net. With the suggestions incorporated in our written testimony, we strongly support HB 2757. And apologies for the feedback on my end.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to AARP. In support.
Aloha. ARP stands in strong support of this legislation. As Nicole indicated, there are many adults who care for their family members. Estimated 154,000 family caregivers in Hawaii provide approximately $2.6 billion in unpaid care. Many juggle work and caregiving. Others must balance child care, work, and adult dependent care. Many family caregivers must cut back their work hours or even leave the workforce to care for loved ones. This should not have to happen. This can create a huge loss in income on top of any existing financial challenges related to caregiving expenses. It also puts their career advancement, retirement savings, and Social Security at risk. Establishing a paid family leave program in Hawaii would allow workers to take time off and still receive a part of their income as they need to care for those with serious illnesses or themselves. Families who have access to paid leave, especially working women, are healthier, more economically secure, and more likely to stay in the workforce and less likely to need medical benefits should they be forced to quit their jobs and or lose health benefits and income. No one should have to choose between their loved ones and their paycheck. Just as an anecdotal comment, folks don't realize that a lot of people in the private sector do not get paid sick leave and vacation. I can speak to my son, who is a full-time employee. He has 2 days paid off. He helped care for his grandmother for 5 years. Obviously, that required him to take some of his own time off. He's not a woman who is caring for young children, but I just want to make sure you realize there are a lot of people who do not get 2 weeks of vacation, 2 weeks of paid leave, and so they really need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Women's Caucus for the Democratic Party of Hawaii in support. Not present. Okay. Next up, we have HGEA in opposition. That's surprising. Anyone online for HGEA? Okay, we'll move on. We have Hawaii Restaurant Association in opposition. Assuming not present.
Good morning, Chair Matayoshi and Vice Chair Garrett. My name is Victor Lim, and I represent the Hawaii Restaurant Association. which is made up of 4,000 eating and drinking places here in Hawaii. Our industry has been one of the hardest hit by the COVID pandemic, and up to today, we are still just struggling to survive. And really, in the aftermath of the COVID, if you take a look at it, we just had a highest minimum wage increase in terms of percentage in the country. We have super high insurance costs, interest rates, labor shortage, high medical insurance, and so on. One of the key messages we continue to hear from our membership is that we hope our legislators do not impose any new mandates that will increase our costs of doing business and add additional administrative duties. We are really just on a shoestring trying to survive. So please hold this bill. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next up, we have Our Revolution Hawaii in support. Not present. Next up, we have HSTA in support. HSTA. Okay, not present. We have Hawaii Workers Center in support.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair. My name is Sergio Alcobilli. I'm the Executive Director of the Hawaii Workers Center. We're a nonprofit organization that empowers low-wage workers to organize for their own political, economic, and social well-being. I wanted to share just my own experience. When my son was born, I worked for an employer that provided 12 weeks of paid parental leave. I took 9 weeks of that because I felt guilty of taking all 12 weeks, but those 9 weeks were probably the best time of my life. My wife at the time wasn't working because it was cheaper for her to stay home and take care of our daughter than to put our daughter in childcare. But those 9 weeks, I look back at it now. My son is now 10 years old, almost 10, and those were probably the best times to be able to bond with him, to be able to help my wife, run errands, go to the store, grab food, things like that. And I know raising children, time goes by so fast. Before you know it, they're already grown. But I look back at that as a parent, and I'm just really grateful for my employer to be able to offer that. This bill is really a comprehensive bill. It's what we're asking for in terms of the communities that we serve. A lot of our worker associations, a lot of them are minimum wage workers. And this is probably one of the biggest issues for them is medical leave and family leave. And this bill would help cover that. Just my experience, I just feel like that's a luxury that's afforded to just a few of us, right? For us in professional jobs or for us in high-paying jobs, that's a luxury that we really take for granted. And I just ask that we continue to support this bill. That this luxury shouldn't just be afforded to the few, but it should be available to everyone. And I hope that we do provide the funding and we work collaboratively with Department of Labor to make this happen. This is really a long time coming, and I appreciate you again for supporting this bill. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We've got a number of individuals who clicked that they were going to be here. Vicky Chabot with comments. Phone call? Okay. Oh, if she comes back while we're still in it, then we'll come back to her. Alapai in support. Not present. Joelle Edwards in support. Not present. Michaela Narita? Nartia? In support. Kealakai Hammond in support. Okay. Janae Ota in support. Nope, not present. And Amy Monk in support. Nope, not present. All right, well. Anyone else here to testify? Thank you.
Good morning, Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Peggy Mirzwa with Hawaii Public Health Institute. My testimony was late, so I am sorry. Public health is what I will talk about. We are in strong support because, there are about 691,000 1,000 people in Hawaii with chronic diseases, and this would give people the ability to address and take care of their disease state. And we can improve health by doing that. We'll also give new parents, time to bond with children, which improves the health of both mother and father and children. And also, only 1 in 4 infants are exclusively breastfed in the state, and this would give time to initiate and maintain breastfeeding, which helps decrease chronic disease later on in life for children, but it also helps to decrease chronic diseases for the person who breastfeeds as well. So, these are health reasons we are in strong support. There are many other reasons out there to be supportive of this measure. And as many people have said, they have a story, as do I. There was a time when I was not working because I was taking care of an infant and a grandparent. And it's hard. And, I would love to see other people never be in that position. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else here to testify on this measure? On Zoom? Okay. We're going to take a brief recess to discuss.
Sorry, Chair.
Sorry, it was so long. Members, any questions? Yes. Hearing none. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Jay.
For HCAN, Nicole Wu. Can you explain a little bit more about some of the benefits of housing TDI or having, TDI housed within the family leave program and what problems other states have faced that didn't do that, specifically like New York?
Okay, so to just explain, for everyone, TDI is temporary disability insurance. And there's a handful of states that have temporary disability insurance programs. We're the last state that doesn't also have paid family leave of the TDI states. In Hawaii, we're unique. Our TDI program is a private insurance program. In the other states, it's a public program. Key difference there. Right now, our employers are taking on not just the 0.43% cost of TDI, but also the administrative burdens of TDI. And Victor Lim said he wants to reduce administrative burdens by putting TDI into a public program that reduces his administrative burden, because this becomes a payroll deduction just like Social Security and Medicare. I've done HR for small nonprofits that I've worked for, and it's, usually you have a payroll service, and it's just another button that you click. Much easier than having to purchase your own insurance. And so temporary disability insurance covers your own care. In some of the other states where they have tried to have the sort of public option TDI next to paid family leave separate, it's a lot more burden for the Department of Labor, for example, and also for the workers, right? You got 2 programs, you got to apply to 2 different things. For example, I know you recently had a child. If you were in that kind of program, you would have had your TDI for the first 5 or 6 weeks, and then you would have had to apply to a new program to get a few more weeks, right? And it's just, they're learning from experience. They did it, they were happy to pass their bills, but now they're like, yeah, maybe that wasn't the best way to go. So just to emphasize that we are definitely looking at the other 13 states and District of Columbia that has this to make sure that we're planning a program that works really well for Hawaii. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and then I have one more as well for you. We've talked about it before, and I think you talked a little bit about this in your response to my last question. But one of the biggest concerns that was raised by DLNR or DLIR is the resources and the cost.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been numerous studies that address that issue specifically. Can you highlight in greater detail what some of them have found so we can dispel some of the misinformation about the cost of family leave?
Mm-hmm. So there's a couple of, back in 2017, the Commission on the Status of Women here in Hawaii got a gigantic grant from U.S. Department of Labor, and my organization helped do a study. It's almost 200 pages. And a national expert came to Hawaii. She spent 3 weeks at DLIR, looking at the computer systems, looking at the staffing, came out with a plan how to implement it over 5 years. It was about between, I'd say, 10 and 20 employees for each of the years to get it started. It was about a little over $1 million per year. And, you know, this is several years ago, and, you know, we definitely would want to update that kind of analysis. But that's ballpark. This is a national expert who's gone all over the country, has looked at these programs everywhere. In other states, in order to start up the program, the state legislature would offer a loan to do those startup costs at a place like DLIR. And then as the payroll deductions come in, that loan would be paid back, right? So I know a few years ago, there was this number running around, $80 million for Washington State. That's how much their legislature authorized as the top amount that they could borrow. They actually didn't borrow that much, and it was paid back after a couple of years through the payroll deductions. In the bill, it does mention it covers DLIR's admin and operations. So in all the other states, they start collecting the payroll deductions for a couple of years before they start paying out the benefits. And the whole point is to cover the costs, cover the computer systems. And so we want to make sure that this does not cost the state a lot, or hopefully cost the state nothing in the end, and be completely covered by the payroll deductions.
Thank you. Thank you so
Anything
much.
else?
Chair, can I ask one more question of DLIR?
Vice Chair, did you need to ask a question first, or I mean, is it a follow-up on this? Oh. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. DLIR? Thank you for your testimony. As we've heard from, I think, a number of the individuals who testified today, both here and on Zoom, I think I'm curious as to why you continuously oppose this bill or the measure of paid family leave. There's so much evidence, research, models that show that this can work. And I mean, I think this is one opportunity of, I think there's 5 or 6 other bills that were introduced on this issue alone. So I want to know why do you keep opposing this? And why do you say that it's so hard to implement when it's been so heavily studied that this is something that can be done all without making it so much more complicated, as you folks love to say in your testimony and your written testimony?
Well, it is kind of complicated because Hawaii has unique laws. We have prepaid and TDI, and some employers provide for those coverages in one policy. And the other unique aspect of Hawaii is we have prepaid, which has an exemption, or an exemption from a ERISA preemption. And so what we're saying is that it's complicated in how to create a paid family leave program that fits into all that and doesn't affect those other things. We can't figure that out on our own, to be honest. So it's complicated. I mean, we support the concept, and I'm sorry, we can't tell you how we would do it. Otherwise, we would have our bill.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. No, I don't want to be too aggressive. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, I need the reminder too sometimes. Vice Chair?
Sorry, Mr. Kunzman, Deputy Director. Hi there. I know, again, in your testimony, you're concerned about the lack of staffing with this bill.
Yes.
And then you did say you'll need 120 positions to effectuate this program?
So if you look at all of the administrative aspects entailed with collecting the money, doing the accounts, dispersing the money, paying benefits, doing the appeals, all this other stuff, it's very similar to what we do on the unemployment insurance side of things. And so we've always referenced the size of UI as a basis in the past to try to give a ballpark estimate of what a family leave system that involves the department collecting and paying out benefits and doing all these aspects of administration. So that's our ballpark estimate about how much the staffing would be required to do this.
Okay, I don't hear you have the different positions and responsibilities laid out. Could you provide the committee with a breakdown? I mean, it just seems like that number's kind of pulled out of thin air.
Oh, yeah, we'd be happy to. Actually, we do have that because we've done that in previous sessions as well.
Okay, yeah, if you could provide that. And also you note that you would require an appropriation for an IT system. Do you have an estimate for such costs?
Not at this time, but we can generate something and give you an estimate, sure.
Okay, thank you, Deputy.
Thanks.
Any members, any other questions? Okay, I do want to ask a question to DLIR first. I did also notice the 120 people. That seems like a lot. How many people do you have working on TDI right now?
May I call up Joanne Vidnar from Disability Compensation? Because I think the number's probably small.
Thank you, Chair. We have 4 positions in TDI.
Okay, thank
for
you.
that program. Thank you.
And Nicole, I've got a question for you. I believe in your testimony you were saying that some states took 5 years to implement this program. Was that to build up a reserve, or was that to more smoothly implement it?
Yeah, I don't think that was my testimony. That might have been Vicky's saying that the implementation timeline is a little bit too quick.
Okay.
And she said that she just got back on. She texted me.
Do you have any thought on the implementation timeline?
I think we need to do this right, and if the implementation timeline from experts like Vicky seems much too short compared to other states, then if we need to add an extra year, that's okay. We need to get this right. I understand that.
Okay. And you said the expert's online right now?
Yeah, you called Vicky's name, and she just texted me and let me know that she's come back from her phone
Members,
call.
with your indulgence, can we move back to the testimony? Okay. Vicky, are you online?
Yeah, hi, I'm here. So sorry about that. It's a pleasure to be with you. My name is Vicki Shabo, and I'm a senior fellow at New America, which is a think tank in DC. And I wanted to just offer my expertise. I provided some feedback on the bill in the testimony as a form of comment. And happy to answer questions.
Okay, members, do you have any questions? In your testimony, you did mention that this would require probably an additional year or another year in addition to the year that we have currently, or the kind of the timeline we currently have scheduled. We basically push out both deadlines a year. Is that compared to other states?
So if the way that I read the bill, and forgive me if it's wrong, the appropriations for the office that would be responsible would get funds in January 1st of 2025. And then there was language about everything being ready to go and start collecting contributions January 1st of 2026 and benefits starting on January 1st, 2027. And just based on what we know, we've done a bunch of research here, including a sprint with one of the states that is starting up now. And the feedback that we've gotten from states and the way that the state timelines have worked in other states that are starting their programs is that a 2-year period of time from the time the office is starting to go is necessary for things like taking testimony and public input on regulations, writing those regulations, procuring IT systems, creating the public outreach and education and the business outreach and education so that everybody is primed and ready and understands the program when you start doing payroll contributions. And then it takes about a year from the time that you're collecting payroll contributions to paying benefits. So my recommendation would be 2 years from the time that the office is starting up. You want to make sure that there's time for the regs to be issued with thought and with checking in with stakeholders. And yeah, the procurement process and the startup process, it's important to put a lot into the front end of that so that the program will operate efficiently and effectively for all of the communities that would benefit from it and for businesses as well.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions for her? All right, if not, now we'll take a recess. Reconvening the Committee on Labor and Government Operations. It is still Thursday, February 1st, 2024, in conference room 309, right about 10:45. All right, so first up, we've got HB 1642 relating to general employment, relating to general employee orientation. We are going to include a mention of this in HRS 89-13A and effect the date to July 1st, 3000. Some tech amendments as well. And we're going to use the word section instead of subsection per the AG's office request. Members, any comments? If not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 1642. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Chair and Vice Chair vote aye. Representative Capella?
Aye.
Representative Martinez? Aye. Representative Sayama is excused. Representative Tam?
Aye.
Representative Alcos is also excused. Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to HB 1644 relating to the employees' retirement system. We are going to defer this DM until Tuesday of next week, February 6th, 2024. We need some narrower language, and I requested a couple of the parties to get me a narrower language on this. So we'll be getting that narrower language and working on it, and hopefully we'll be ready for DM next week, Tuesday. So defer for now. Moving on to HB 1645 relating to state position vacancies. We are going to be amending this bill, or Chair's recommendation is to amend this bill to take all of the new things in this report that doesn't already exist in the report that DHERD is already required to provide, and just add them to the previous report that's already required. Defecting the date to July 1st, 3000, some tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any comments? Okay, if not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 1645. The Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Noting the excused absences of Representatives Sayama and Alcos, who will be excused for the duration of today's decision-making. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to HB 1832. We are going to be deferring this decision-making till next week, Tuesday, February 6, 2024. I think I need to have a lawyer conversation with the AG's office on the Kuomo'o case and whether that applies. But we will be voting on it next week, Tuesday. So defer for now. Next on the agenda is HB 1889 relating to workers' compensation medical benefits. We'll be defecting the date to July 1st, 3000, some tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any comments? Okay, I've just got one. I can't believe this hasn't been done yet. that really shocked me. Yep. Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 1889. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to HB 1944 relating to workers' compensation. We'll just be defecting the date to July 1st, 3000. Members, any comments? Seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 1944. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to HB 1945 relating to a leave cash-out program. We'll be removing Department of Health from the pilot program per their request. And I do want to make sure we're going to revise the language slightly to make sure that comp time is included in this program for cash-out purposes per UPW. We'll be taking out the language that rules need to be promulgated in the Hawaii administrative rules, but we will be including language that the rules will need to be created for this pilot program by mutual agreement between DPS and the relevant unions. Members, and defecting the date to 3000. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 1945. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to HB 1946 relating to process improvement. We'll be amending this bill to administratively attach this office to the governor's office instead of the lieutenant governor's office, defecting the date to July 1st, 3000. Members, any questions or comments? Okay, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 1946. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HB 1947, relating to the employees' retirement system. We're going to be adopting ERS's clarifying amendment for regarding termination and forfeiture, defecting the date to July 1st, 3000, some tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. And we note that the bill already contains a blank appropriation amount. We'll also be having some conversations with ERS on this bill. Members, any comments? Yeah, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 1947. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HB 2070, relating to procurement. We'll just be defecting the date to July 1st, 3000. Members, any comments? Not, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 2070. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Okay, thank you, members. Moving on to HB 2196, relating to public employment. Chair's recommendation is to include UH's amendment, which broadens the scope a little bit, defecting the date to July 1st, 3000, and some tech amendments. Any comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 2196. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. Moving on to HB 2197, relating to Hawaii Retirement Savings Act. We'll be defecting the date to July 1st, 3000, and some tech amendments for clarity, consistency, and style. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 2197. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HB 2199, relating to workforce development. We'll be defecting the date to July 1st, 3000, and some tech amendments. Members, any comments? Okay, seeing none, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 2199. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you. Moving on to HB 2254, relating to employees, defecting the date to July 1st, 3000. We're also changing on page 3, line 10, temporary employee exchange to temporary employee interchange for consistency. Members, any comments? Yeah, Vice Chair for the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members voting on House Bill 2254. Chair's recommendation is to pass with amendments. Anyone voting with reservations or nay? Seeing none, Chair, your recommendation is adopted.
Thank you, members. For Bill HB 2757, I think we need a little more time to think about what amendments we're going to be making. So I'm going to be deferring decision-making to Tuesday, February 6, 2024, just to give us a little more time. All right, and I think that's it.